Ugh, one of Ben's fantasy books. This thing is big enough you get neck problems from reading it.
Julius' torch flickered madly as the stone slab crashed into place with a tumultuous stone slabby crashy sound.
Like wet thunder.
Julius thought.
The wettest and darkest thunder.
For a moment the torch guttered out, and everyone sucked in their breath with terror. They all knew this torch was all that kept them from the maddening gloom of the Yak God's temple. But some inner resilience took hold of the flame and it sparked back to life. Julius sighed in relief. With the slab door of the temple firmly shut behind them, there was only one way to proceed. The inky moth of the tunnel yawned open before them, all cobwebs and cracked stone, ready to consume any soul who dared gaze too long into its depths. Julius wondered how long it had been since that door had been open. And, in the ancient years before this doom had been sealed away, how many foolish souls had been digested in the bowels of evil below. The royal steward paced nervously, frantically, gumming mouthless words of anxiety at Julius, but no sounds came out.
Be quiet.
Julius told him anyway. Julius bent over to examine the dusty floor. It made them look intelligent. Their sword glinted in the torchlight, making Julius look dangerous.
Dangerous and intelligent.
Julius thought.
Just like this temple.
Dangerously and intelligently they scanned the floor until at last Julius found what they sought. Footprints. They had assumed they were the first group to enter this temple in 1,000 years. They were wrong. Julius turned to the others.
Whatever happens from here, we know he came this way. So too must we.
The others nodded in agreement. Even the royal steward. Theirs was a dark mission, but essential.
Will you kill him when you find him?
If he doesn't kill me first.
Julius said, walking into the darkness intelligently. Rels drew from his pouch a silver cup. He had taken it from the sneak thief's corpse, who in turn had pilfered it from the nobleman's collection, who had purchased it from the corrupt watchman who had snuck it out from the royal treasury where it had been acquiring years of dust after having been claimed in the conquest over the Zafia nation, who 3,000 years ago had stolen it from the silversmith monks of the Yak God, who had forged it in the ashes of sacrificial yaks, the blessed animal of the Yak God, the most yaki of gods, nameless and formless except the yaki form of the head of a yak fixed atop the body of a yak. Rels held the cup gingerly in his hands and eyed his companion, Brutus the Unlearned, who prided himself in his ability to carry a lot without feeling over-encumbered, as well as also despising reading.
Too bad for him,
thought Rels. If Brutus the Unlearned had not skipped his lessons on ancient evil empires, if the fool had not been so averse to knowledge, if he had even thought for a moment that perhaps not everything he needed to know of the world could be learned from the sword and the tavern, perhaps the fool might have been smart enough to not be a fool, and smart enough to survive. He might have even read about the Yak God's promise. The promise of the power of the Yak bestowed upon any who would bring a blessed silver item to the shrine in the center of his temple, and use as the agent in the ultimate sacrifice of a soul upon the altar.
What's that?
Brutus inquired upon seeing Rels examine the cup.
Your payment.
Rels said.
Pure silver. And as old as the very stone walls around us.
I like silver. Give it here.
You'll get it when we get to the center. We have a ways to go.
Brutus shrugged. Rels was glad the man didn't press the issue. The cup glinted in the dim light. It seemed to whisper to Rels, drawing him closer. He quickly put it away, lest he succumb to its sinister lure. That it was a cup was unfortunate. It was hard to kill someone with a cup. When Julius had finished crossing the bridge, they turned back to the others. The crew was looking sparser, without Weltiver, or, more importantly, without Weltiver's warhammers. Julius wondered if anyone could survive such a fall. If not, perhaps Weltiver would join them in the next life. If not, perhaps just the warhammers could. The royal steward and the twins waited for Julius to signal to them. The water was thick and dark below them, as still as ink porridge. The cavernous vault loomed above them, not unlike the porridge surface below, but neither in a palatable porridge way. No. This was more of the certain death kind of porridge. Julius had tasted from the certain death porridge cup more often than they cared to admit, and they had the scars to show it, everywhere except their face, of course. The others were waiting.
It will hold.
Julius said.
Just take it one at a time. And don't think about how shallow the water isn't. Steward, you're next.
Why me?
You're the one with the banishment spell. And we can't leave you alone over there without protection.
The one twin that didn't look like the other one nodded and gave the steward a gentle push forward.
Fine. Fine.
The steward said, and he started timidly across. The steward moved slowly, step after step, gingerly testing each plank of the bridge. Julius rolled their eyes. The man had been slowing them down. The warlock was ahead of them and time was of the essence. Could this royal fool not see the essence of which time was? Of course not. The man could barely see past his royal cummerbund. Suddenly, there was a flash of movement from the water, and in an instant, the steward vanished below the surface.
What was that?
One of the twins, probably Greg, shouted.
Something is in there.
Don't just stand there. We have to get him out.
Julius shouted. The goblin, despite being a skillful negotiator, was quickly negotiated into separating its head from its body by the strong arguments of Julius' sword. Goblins were bad enough. Talking goblins? No thank you.
He was trying to tell us the route through the maze of ribs.
The first twin said.
Leave the other one alive.
We don't need a goblin's help.
Julius said. In their mind, goblins should be seen, not heard, and only be seen dying. Julius opted not to tell them about their village and the goblin raiding party that slew half Julius' co-villagers and their fathers heard. They'd only been a young youth then. Their days had been filled with exploring the mountainside, chasing local fauna, and helping their father shepherd the perpetual lamb population. They could never let another goblin live as long as they lived. Julius turned to the other goblin.
I'll let you live if you tell us the way through the maze.
Julius said. The less dead of the two goblins gulped. It looked at the more dead of the two goblins, which was dead.
I will talk. Just don't kill my head. Always follow the right wall. You will always find the end eventually. But you will miss the fountain in the center, and it's the only way to survive the...
The goblin stopped abruptly.
Go on.
One of the twins said, but an assassin's arrow had suddenly appeared in the goblin's throat and that hindered the conversation.
An assassin.
Julius turned around and scanned the shadowy gloom. They caught the eyes of something far off, perched atop a toppled column. It sprung away and vanished into the shadowry areas. It was gone before Julius could even think about chasing it.
A pantherman archer.
Julius said. Pantherman? Here, in the Yak Temple? This changed everything. What stake did the panther people have in all this?
What did he know?
One of the two twins said.
And what waits for us in this maze of ribs?
With the grisly deed done, Rels drew a cup full of the bloodiest blood he could draw from the remains of Brutus. The cup now full, he proceeded to place the silver vessel upon the Yak god's altar, and then from a hidden pocket in his robes he produced the Rites of Power, the ancient document he had so long ago come across, and the catalyst for this entire mad pursuit. He savored the moment. The chamber was lined with the statues carved into the Yak pantheon. Each was different, Rels knew, but to his mortal eyes they appeared the same. What would happen to him when he said the rites, and splashed the cup's contents across the altar? Would he feel the transformation immediately? Would it swell up within him like 1,000 yaks, yearning to burst into the sky like some free murder of crows? Rels knew that was ridiculous. Yaks didn't fly. Unless, perhaps, that was the power of the Yak god. Whatever happened, Rels knew he would forever be changed. He would shrug off his mortal shell and become something beautiful. Even Bertruda would be impressed with the transformation. As he rolled open the scroll, he recalled the last time he saw her, with her cruel sneer and mocking eyes. He'd loved her then, but that was before the journey through the realm of shadows, before that first chance encounter with the spirit of the Yak god, before he even found the Rites of Power. It was before the briar swamp and the eels and the trenches of stench and stone golems of Everstone and the eels again, and the musical interlude Tavern Massacre. And that was even before the eels. Did he still love her now? Did it matter? He began to read. The words came slowly. His lips were cracked and chapped from his travels, and he'd all but forgotten the sound of his own voice. But still the words came, slow at first, but then effortlessly, and then, suddenly and recklessly pulled from him without control, as if drawn forth by some clawed unseen grip, as twisted as his very soul, mangled as it was by the terrible cost of his pursuit. and on the rites went, terrifying and very bad sounding. Unseen, unnoticed, within Rel's stained boots, his toes started to fuse, the skin melting into one, the bones fusing. His foot slipped out of the boot, only it was a foot no longer. It had the curious shape of a hoof.
By the gods, it feels good to have a real meal inside of me.
Weltiver said.
Are you sure you don't eat meat, Julius? Everyone requires sustenance.
For you, perhaps. I require no sustenance beyond the avengement of my people.
Julius said.
And I hunger for it, so.
Has anyone given it a thought as to how strange it is to find a yak here?
The steward asked, dabbing his sleeve at the corners of his lips. They were in the center of a subterranean cavern miles beneath an ancient temple, after all. Then again, it was the temple of the yak god.
The very robes of the sorcerer hung off its back.
Julius said.
He brought it with him.
No doubt it was a pack yak. Yak backs for packing your knapsack are common.
Weltiver agreed, before suddenly wincing in pain. His leg bothered him. It had not improved since the amputation, but Julius was optimistic. After all, they had given up hope on Weltiver before, only to wish they had not given up hope when they accidentally found him dangling from the cave eagle's nest. Julius could not fathom a world where the gods would pluck such a man from the abyss, only to feed him morsel by morsel to the Reaper instead, one leg at a time. All the same, they were glad that most of Weltiver had survived. With a little luck, he would survive the inevitable infection of his wounds too.
My twin would have not approved.
The twin that was still alive said. The loss was a sore subject for him still, since it had only been 35 minutes or so.
We have consumed a yak within the temple to the yak god itself. Would that we had not invited such a curse upon ourselves. All life is sacred.
Then so is ours.
Said Weltiver.
The yak god, if it is real, sent us this pack yak as a gift. We live to pursue this treacherous foe a day longer.
But where could he have gone from here?
Julius said. They had found the sorcerer's companion, a lifeless corpse, nearby, and now this lone animal, wandering the holiest chapel of the temple. But from here, the trail had gone cold.
Quiet.
Weltiver said, raising his axe.
We're being watched.
Is that the tea of immortality?
Julius said, showing the silver goblet to the twinless twin.
It is. But I would not drink of it. Your mortal life is but a flash. Immortality is forever. I would not wish the roaming of immortality upon my worst enemy.
But will it save Weltiver?
Julius asked, taking the silver goblet of tea to the dying man. They had shared much friendship on this journey. Julius had learned some pretty good axe moves from him, and they had compared biceps many times. It would be a shame to lose their companion now.
It will save them.
The steward said, darkly.
But at what cost?
Julius nodded, also darkly. Grim had been their mission, and grim had been their journey. Not one among them had expected they would all make it out alive, except the royal steward, on account of ignorance.
Julius.
Weltiver's voice was weak.
Don't. Let me go.
I cannot. The power of our friendship has meant too much to me.
There is power of friendship even in death.
Weltiver said.
And besides, you need that tea of immortality. It is the only thing that can save the realm.
Julius raised an eyebrow.
There is much I did not tell you. One thing I did not tell you is that my name is not Weltiver, but Ludiver, first of my name, son of Fentidiver the Great, of the Radatativer line.
Julius drew back.
The royal prince. Did you know this?
Julius said, flashing a look to the royal steward. He looked as shocked as the rest of them.
I had no idea. We are not permitted to look upon the royal family. None has seen the face of the prince, save the regent and the royal physicians. But now we must give him the tea of immortality. We cannot return without the prince.
Now you wish to curse him with immortality?
The twin who wasn't dead said.
It is better than the death his father will bestow upon me. What cruelty is this, to survive such, only to meet my end thusly?
You are not going back to my father?
Weltiver, who was actually Ludiver, said weakly. The others were gone. Both twins were dead. Julius vowed to their dying mother to protect Longbroken. The unbearable steward had been eaten twice by bears, regurgitated the first time. Rels the sorcerer had vanished. Perhaps he too met his end in the temple. And Weltiver, or rather the prince, was buried under a pile of stones with those beautiful axes. Perhaps they had indeed been cursed by consuming that pack animal? And refraining was the only reason Julius now lived. The thought crept into Julius' mind like a terrible claw, grabbing at the gooey stuff there. It couldn't have been the yak curse. At least 2 companions had perished before that meal, so they were probably cursed before then, too. Julius' new mission was haunting. There is no Bone Lord, Julius said, hoping it were true. The Bone Lord legends were legendary. Not a person alive hadn't heard the sinister tales. Some men crave power, some, well, the Bone Lord craved bones. The villain would not rest until he had collected them all. Unparalleled in his power, the necromancer raised whole armies of corpses, only to disassemble, properly clean, and categorize their remains in cavernous vaults beneath the world. He had not a care for cartilage or skin or muscle, or, as it turned out, for life. Whole nations fell to his obsession. When at last Death came to collect him, the Bone Lord had a clever ruse to instead collect Mistress Death herself. Mistress Death escaped, but shunned the Bone Lord ever since. They said that the Bone Lord wandered the hills to this day, searching to either collect his ultimate prize or be collected. But that was myth. And if there were a Bone Lord, what does that have to do with the temple to the Yak God? Why would Weltiver accompany their party to such a forbidden place if they knew of such other threats? The Silver Cup spoke in answer to him. This tea of immortality was the key to this new threat. Weltiver knew it. What good does that do against a foe that is already immortal?
Look, I'm not like other skeletons.
The skeleton said.
The Bone Lord has no power over me.
Be careful.
Kivane the thief said, drawing her knife.
I've never met a trustworthy skeleton.
Julius paused, having never met a trustworthy skeleton either. It watched them with hollow eyes from its cage. Still, Julius wasn't sure if they should even trust the thief yet either, who, by virtue of profession, was not the most trustworthy of companions. None of the new companions were a thief, a sellsword mercenary slug, an escaped convict, an impoverished statesman, a jester. No shred of honor among them. To have fallen to such company, Julius thought, not one of them had biceps as honorable as Weltiver.
Precisely what will that knife do to a skeleton?
The jester asked.
It'll do more than any of your terrible jokes.
You have a point.
Eyeing Kivane's knife, the skeleton sensed its opportunity for freedom was fading.
Look, just let me out and I'll tell you which of the paths will take you to Fishkill Junction.
The skeleton said.
You said you needed to get there, and I need to get out. I've been here for years. Let's help each other.
Years? Without provisions? How is it that you survived here in this cage?
The mercenary asked. Mercenaries were always a bit thick, Julius thought.
I'm a skeleton. I don't need food or water. I just need to not be so bored. Come on, let me out.
Don't listen to him. He'll follow us everywhere.
I will not. I don't even like you all. I have 9 kids I need to go see.
9 kids?
At least. There may be some I don't know about. And they might be fully grown now. One does lose track of time. I hope they are all still undead.
Julius was no fool. Animated skeletons were not a creature to take lightly. Still, they needed to know how to proceed.
What is your name, skeleton?
With the vile beasts slain at last, the companions paused to catch their breath. Other than the stateman's pride, there seemed to be no injury to the party. Also, the jester twisted an ankle, but that was his own fault, not the Wartwalker's. Who did he think he was? Julius thought to themselves about the stateman, not the jester, because the jester was pretty good at knowing who they were already and also good at telling them that information a lot. One cannot negotiate with a rabid squid-face Wartwalker. Words served little purpose against the foul emissions of such a foe, or against anything here in the wild wilderness. It perplexed Julius to no end why the stateman had so eagerly wished to join them, and Julius suspected the man had some nefarious objective. Still, with company such as these, who didn't? Poop Hug the sellsword wiped black squid-face ichor from his blades and returned them to their place on his belt. Kivane retrieved her arrows one by one, the Wartwalker corpse giving a sudden posthumous jolt as she yanked each out. The jester had once again shown them the usefulness of his bag of tricks, filled with blinding powders and dazzling noisemakers. Even the skeleton, true to his word, had gotten a few hits in, Although since they still did not trust the skeleton enough to arm him, the magical creature had armed itself with its own arm to club at the wartwalker. Julius remembered the old wise woman's words. The old crone had approached with a truth-telling paper, that clever folded arrangement that looked not unlike a frog's mouth. The wise woman flapped the paper moth open and closed, reading Julius' fortune within the myriad folds. One of these shall be your spouse, but another shall be your lover, and yet a third will die by your hand. Julius banished the memory from their thoughts the moment it entered. Such a notion was the territory of children, not of warriors. And in such a place as this, with a mission as dark as theirs, emotions would only bring their doom. All the same, the skeleton was the only one who seemed like good marriage material.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the Shadow and Yak story.